conversion that we try to do. Okay, with these words, let me invite Aditya Mukherjee back again on the stage, but to speak. Irfan Habib Sahab, I don't know. Suja, ota dekhe nebe? Irfan Habib ache kina kothay hai? Just so we'll start with Aditya. Tuteja has to chair.
And you are the third.
I am the third. So, no, we have participants here, but we cannot invite them unnoticed because Anuradha ji is there for tomorrow. Nadeem can. Sorry, Rajan, why don't you come and chair in the meantime?
Nadeem?
हाँ. नहीं, राजन साहब क्या बोल दिया आप?
Nadeem साहब, please chair कर दीजिए.
सूना नहीं लगना चाहिए, पावर वैक्यूम होता नहीं है. I don't know, I have to go out then.
चलो तुम बैठो.
हाँ, आइए. With these words, let me invite Professor Nadeem Rijavi from Aligarh Muslim University, who has been. Today sahab aa gaya, actually. Anyway, you also sit there. Come back here. Lordna to. Professor Tuteja, as many of you know, is also one of our senior historian, also works in the similar area that we work on, and he particularly wanted to be in this panel and listening to all of us. His chair. So now I leave it to Professor Tuteja to chair the session.
Yes, friends, we start the fourth session, I suppose, or the last session of this day, of a very important panel that is on Gandhi and making of modern India. Indeed, it was a very good idea on the part of the Indian History Congress to hold this panel, and we are going to have very distinguished panelists, Professor Irfan Habib, Professor Aditya Mukherjee, and Professor Rakesh. In fact, I consider it my privilege to chair this panel, and for that I am thankful to Rakesh. So I'll not say any more word about this theme. I would straight away request my friend and also a very distinguished historian, Professor Aditya Mukherjee, to make his presentation. Sir, we have 1.5 hours for this session. So what I have thought, I leave it to you, but I thought that if each speaker takes 25 minutes, we'll give to each speaker 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful again to the organizers of the History Congress, and particularly to Rakesh, to not allow this session of the History Congress to let the 150th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi pass unnoticed. I think it was extremely, we have honored ourselves by making it a point to have a major panel on Gandhiji. I will talk on Gandhiji and the class character of the Indian national movement. The killers of Gandhi argued essentially that he was pro-Muslim. I'm summarizing because the killers of Gandhi are known not to be theoreticians or even to be educated mostly. And secondly, that he made the Hindus weak. His idea of ahimsa, etc., made the Hindus weak, and he was a pro-Muslim person. But this is not something that I'm going to discuss today. There is much to be said on the critique from the right of Gandhiji. After all, we lost one of the greatest human beings that India produced as a result. I'm going to talk of another strand which diminishes Gandhi, which calls him a bourgeois leader, a leader who acted at the behest, if not on behalf of the bourgeoisie, calls him elitist, anti-people, a person who contained the people rather than led them into action, your entire subaltern school is based on this understanding that Gandhi was not only non-revolutionary, he actually prevented the revolutionary growth of the Indian people. It is these ideas which have permeated academia to a great extent and have continued to stay. Even when we are lauding Gandhi, we are diminishing him considerably. And I would like to go to the roots of this. How is it that some of our tallest historians and thinkers make the same errors about Gandhiji? The roots go back to a class analysis of the national movement. A class analysis of the national liberation struggle is critical in determining what relationship you will have to that struggle. And also critical in understanding what is the state that gets produced as a result of this liberation struggle. If you have a certain understanding, a class understanding of that national liberation struggle, then the state which is a product of that struggle is also defined by that. So therefore it is a very important area which determines the politics of the country. In India, it is the left which first undertook the task of trying to determine the class character of the national movement and arrive at an understanding of what is the relationship between the class, the nation, and the party. It is the left which starts this debate. As Mohit Sen, one of the brilliant thinkers from within the communist movement, remarked that it was a great pity that communism in India, from its very early stage, came under the influence of Stalinism and not under the influence of other tendencies within Marxism from a very early stage. Now, why does he say that? Will become clear in a few minutes. What is the Stalinist position? The Stalinist position on all these questions, the colonial question as it was called in the Comintern, gets crystallized in the 6th Congress of the Comintern in 1928. Now, please bear with me, I'm not going completely off the subject. You will see why what I'm saying now is relevant in understanding Gandhi. It came to the following. I'm summarizing now in very brief what is the 6th Congress position. Number one, they collapsed the national and the social question. That is, they collapsed the question of anti-imperialism with the question of anti-capitalism and come to the conclusion that you can be anti-imperialist only if you are also anti-capitalist. That is, only the working class can make an anti-imperialist revolution. The bourgeoisie cannot. To quote, they say, overthrow of imperialist domination, underline, cannot be a bourgeois revolution. So the bourgeoisie cannot do it, number one. First mistake. The second is, the bourgeoisie, they say, or the capitalist class, if you like, in a colonial situation, they say, a priori, without investigation, is pro-imperialist or comprador. So the colonial bourgeoisie cannot be anti-imperialist because they are comprador. They are compromised because of a number of reasons, which I don't want to go into. The third generalization that they make is, the Indian National Congress, the leading party of the Indian national movement, was a bourgeois party. Now, if you just follow logic, the bourgeoisie is comprador, the Indian National Congress is a bourgeois party, which means the Indian National Congress is not anti-imperialist. Now, being logical, they came exactly to this conclusion. I'm quoting again the Executive Council of the Comintern. Bourgeois nationalism, or the so-called agents of the bourgeoisie in the national movement, so the Congress becomes the agents of the bourgeoisie, were the main obstacles to the struggle against imperialism. So not only were they leading the anti-imperialist struggle, they were the main obstacles. So what? And this is being said in 1928, and precisely the time that mass movements just begin to happen, the Anti-Simon Commission, and then followed by the civil disobedience, etc. So how do you explain that? You explain that by saying Gandhi and the Congress were, to use a phrase which was common those days, were bamboozling the masses, making fools of them, containing them rather than leading them to revolution. All right? So this was the position. Now, with this position, the Comintern asked the Indian communists who were doing exactly the opposite. The Indian communists had formed the workers' and peasants' parties as early as 1921-22, which worked within the Congress as a wing of the Congress and were extremely successful. They were growing rapidly in the trade union movement through the Gidni Kamgar Union, for example. They had a 6-month strikes in Bombay as early as 1928 and were also getting very powerful within the Congress. The provincial Congress committees would typically have several communists in them. So it was beginning to have a lot of influence. But following the 6th Congress line, they were now said, since the Congress is not anti-imperialist, so therefore they must leave the Congress. So they were forced. They were asked to. There was resistance from within the Congress. People like Dange had actually opposed it. But such was the prestige of the Russian Revolution and Stalin deriving from that, that they could not withstand the pressure and gave in, and they left the Congress with disastrous results. The communist influence within the national movement and in the working class just dropped from being the most powerful working class organization, the GKU in Bombay. Their membership shrank to negligible numbers. This position was changed. Now, this position was changed in the 7th Congress in 1935, which is called the Congress where the Dimitrov's name is very popular, the Bulgarian communist leader, who now argued the opposite, argued for the united front. And that is, you have to work within the Congress. So from saying that the Congress is not an anti-imperialist organization, the Congress again becomes an anti-imperialist organization, and the communists join the Congress. So the Congress Socialist Party and the communists, they are back into the Congress. The tallest communist leaders, people like Sohan Singh Josh, EMS Namudripad, were all congressmen in that period, and they again beginning to have an influence. But this zigzag did not lead to a re-examination of the Stalinist roots of the earlier position. The result was that periodically that position would keep coming back. And it came back in 1947 itself. When the communist leadership described, they said, "Ye azadi jhuti hai. This is not independence at all." Why? Because a priori an assumption had been made that the Congress was a bourgeois party, the bourgeoisie was comprador, therefore the revolution made by them cannot be a revolution. All right? So it led to, this is what is called the tyranny of theory. Your theory led you to this tyrannical position that there was no independence, and it is staring you in the face that it was. I want to make it very clear that this was not the Marxist position. You cannot lambast left or the Marxists simply because this happened to be the Stalinist position. Lenin, from the very beginning, took the opposite position. He said Gandhi was a revolutionary. He described Gandhi as a revolutionary because he says, he gives the reasons. One, he brought the people of India into politics, took fear out of their minds, brought them out into politics, and two, created the base from which the politics could be taken further left. Which, I mean, I must say that both the descriptions were absolutely correct, and in fact our dozens of interviews that we have done with communist leaders all over the country, they have asserted that they could grow precisely in the areas where the national movement was strong and could not make an entry into areas where they were not strong. So it was precisely this. Gandhiji brings them into politics, creates a situation where you can take it further. And there is nothing in Gandhi's politics or his understanding or his philosophy which says that you cannot work for the liberation of the working class and the oppressed. On the contrary, you could ride on Gandhiji's back rather than see him as an obstacle. So as I said, this thing keeps coming back. So it didn't come back only in 1947. It came back in the writings of one of the most well-known historians of the country, Professor Sumit Sarkar. Sarkar argues in a very popular book, widely read, and in a number of articles, that now see the similarity, as if reading out of the 6th Congress. The bourgeoisie, he says, is incapable of being consistently anti-imperialist. So he changes it from saying it is comprador, he says it is not capable of being anti-imperialist. And he gives a set of reasons. I don't have the time to discuss it, but if you ask questions, I'll tell you how they were wrong reasons. Second thing he says, the Indian National Congress was controlled, dominated, and pressurized by the bourgeoisie, which is the same thing as the 6th Congress line, that the Congress and the bourgeoisie are the same. And this is, as I said, one of the most sophisticated historians. So this is why one has to get to the roots of the malady. If you don't get to the roots of the malady, you do not get rid of it. So, and then he gives proof. How did the bourgeoisie control the Congress? Again, taking from your present and putting it in the past. The press and funds. Again, I'm shocked that a historian should argue this. The press was not controlled by the corporates during the national movement. Almost every nationalist leader has his own newspaper. Number one. And the issue of funds, I will come in a moment. These are days when you can buy MLAs and MPs with money. But, again, you're trying to understand, as I said, one of the greatest mass movements in the world with tools of analysis with which you understand politics in the provinces in India today. What is being missed in this kind of understanding? The first thing that is being missed is that anti-imperialist movements globally, wherever there are such, are by definition multi-class movements. Because they are movements which are fighting imperialism which oppresses the colonial people as a whole. They do not only oppress the working class or the landless laborer. They oppress the Indian people as a whole, or the colonial people as a whole. So the colonial people as a whole, the term people class has often been used, therefore. The people become a class in this revolutionary movement. So that is number one that is being missed, that multi-class nature of a movement, anti-imperialist movement. The second thing that is missed is the relative autonomy of each class, which is a participant in the movement. It is part of the movement and yet not in a dominant, no class is in a dominant position. Each of them, the movement is necessarily autonomous, relatively autonomous. It is partly draws from it and yet is autonomous from the class. So what the Congress was, therefore, was, as has often been said, it was a platform. It was not a class party. It was a platform where all classes who were opposed to imperialism could participate. So it was like a wide spectrum, from the communists to the socialists to the left nationalists like Jawaharlal Nehru to Gandhiji to the right wing to Patel, Prasad, including up to the liberals, Sapru and Jayakar. So this is the spectrum where there are contending classes. So within the spectrum of the national movement, like in any anti-imperialist movement, there is a contention between the classes which have come together. And the way it is handled is that you necessarily have a process of what is called class adjustment. When you're coming together, when contending classes come together to fight a movement, they have to adjust each other's interests. A phrase that is used by Mao, a practice that is done by Mao very effectively. How do you adjust the interests of various classes? The Gandhi's role, far from being a bourgeois mascot, as Sumit Sarkar calls him, was to weigh in favor of the poor and the oppressed. Rather than, so he does a class adjustment towards the left rather than towards the right. So it's a complete misunderstanding or misrepresentation of Indian history to see Gandhiji as a bourgeois representative. He is pushing the movement towards the left. His choice of Nehru, as was discussed in the last session, is not accidental because he has moved. The reason why Gandhi remains the leader, unquestioned leader, of this wide spectrum which has communists and JPites to the liberals, why is it that everybody accepts him as a leader? Because he reflects correctly the balance of forces in this multi-class movement. As the balance of forces shifts towards the left, Gandhiji's position begins to shift. As two of the papers in the previous session clearly show that Gandhiji's position on almost each issue is shifting over time, and he's balancing, he's moving along with his people. Sumit Sarkar gives another example. When he talks about, he says, how do you prove that the bourgeoisie controlled the movement, controlled Gandhiji, or the national movement, or the Congress? He says, when the movement is going to be launched, when it is going to be withdrawn, when it is going to be, whether it will be launched or not is determined by the bourgeoisie. And he does a very deep, detailed, almost detective story type description of how the Gandhi-Irvin Pact occurs. And he says that, the movement sort of builds up, he shows how it comes to a peak, and then a telegram comes to Gandhiji. And followed by that, a phone call comes, one from Birla and for the Purushottam Das. And lo and behold, the next day there is the Gandhi-Irvin Pact. Bad history. The fact that two events, even E.H. Carr will tell you this, that if two events happen one after the other, it doesn't prove that one has caused the other. Tuteja Sahib is looking at me favorably and I collapse here and die. It's not because he looked at me favorably. I said, one shouldn't have to tell historians this. That somebody wrote a letter and there's a Gandhi-Irvin Pact the next day doesn't prove that that is what caused it. But then there it is, written and read by the millions of this poor country of ours. This, when there could be half a dozen other reasons why there was the Gandhi-Irvin Pact, which any historical analysis will show you. Even Sumit Sarkar's article will show you that the movement was actually beginning to wane. Except in Guntur and one area in Bihar. It was, was it not Bihar? Anyway, Vidula will correct me if I'm factually wrong on that. Two small areas, the movement was beginning to wane. And any general of a movement, as he was called, and strangely, the non-violent leader of the national movement was called the general, withdraws a movement when it is at its peak, doesn't wait for a bargain when you have already been destroyed. So he hits at the time when you can get something out of it. And what does he get? He gets the Gandhi-Irvin Pact, which is seen by the people of India as a victory. The historian says it's a sellout to imperialism. The people see it as a victory. For the first time, the Viceroy is talking to Gandhiji as representing the Indian people. Have a sense of history. I mean, this is a historic moment. And it is being treated as... There are multiple other reasons. And in our interviews, of which we've done about 3,000 hours with the people who participated in the national movement, to the last man, everybody, ordinary people understood what it was. The argument that was given was that mass movements cannot be permanent. The capacity of the masses, the capacity of the poor to struggle is not endless. It is not a guerrilla movement of professional revolutionaries who can go on fighting and fighting till they die themselves. It's ordinary people, millions and millions of them. Their capacity to resist and their capacity to face repression is limited. I mean, this is another argument. As I said, there could be half a dozen other arguments which historians of the national movement have talked about, where you see why the pact was there. Certainly, it cannot be explained in this instrumentalist manner that some sweet nothings were whispered into Gandhiji's ears and he withdrew this movement. Then comes the question of funding. Just as Sarkar and the Stalinist left believed that Gandhiji was controlled by funding, so did the British. Lord Linlithgow, the Viceroy, in fact, sets up a huge national level inquiry. He gets the British intelligence, one of the best intelligence in the world, without dispute, to go into this question of what he calls, what is the link, he says, you find out, between the Gandhian money bags and the Congress and the movement. So the idea was, if you can cut this link of the money bags, then the Congress will collapse. But what does this intelligence produce? These are all easily available now in the transfer of power papers. The intelligence report is very, very significant. It says that the Congress in the movement phases did not need any money at all. This we discovered 50 years later in the 1980s, when we were doing our interviews all over the country without any budget. And we would go into the villages, and when they would find out why we have come, their eyes would light up and they said, "You've come on a mission." And the whole village would organize themselves, आपने यहाँ पे रुकना है, यहाँ पे खाना खाना है, यहाँ पे बेड लगेंगे, etc. And we were like the guests, and we were only studying the movement. So imagine the movement when it happens. Are they dependent on money? I mean, as I said, this is again the pettiness of the present being put on the enormously valiant and brilliant past. So the movement says, the report says, in the movement phases it was not important. In the election phases, they said yes, they did need the money. But even there, again the report says, the prestige of the Congress was far more important than who paid what. So it was of no relevance, and they come up with this brilliant conclusion. And I will take 1 minute to quote this. They say, the support given by Indian big business to the Congress movement may be compared to that given by the Russian big business to the Mensheviks before the Russian Revolution, and that given by the German big business to the Nazis. I could add, this is my own, and Indian big business to Modi. In all these instances, big business failed conspicuously in the end to dominate the government which it helped to create. They thought that they were going to control it. In all these cases, they said they failed to dominate the government which helped to create, and there is no reason to suppose that Indian big business will prove any more successful in realizing their ambitions in that direction. Basically, they are saying that this notion of big business controlling the Congress has no percentage. Gandhiji himself brilliantly, as only he could, in a matter of 2 or 3 sentences, enumerated as early as 1922 what is the relationship between business, their funding, and the national movement. I cannot do better than just read what Gandhiji says. While he is welcoming and even appealing for support from merchants and mill owners in 1920, Gandhiji simultaneously says the following. He says, whether they, that is the businessmen, do so or not, the country's march to freedom cannot be made to depend on any corporation or groups of men. This is a mass manifestation. The masses are moving rapidly towards deliverance, and they must move whether with the aid of organized capital or without. He had read his economics. I mean, this is very humble to say कि मैंने तो कुछ पढ़ा ही नहीं है. So don't believe all that. Look at the language. He says the masses are moving rapidly towards deliverance, and they must move whether with the aid of organized capital or without. This must therefore be a movement independent of capital and yet not antagonistic to it. This is high theory. This is the theory of relative autonomy of a class from a movement. Expressed in such simple words. He says, only if capital came to the aid of the masses, it would redound to their credit. What he's saying is, the movement is autonomous. It is going to go ahead in any case. If capital comes to its aid, their weight in the movement will increase. If they don't, they are the losers, not the movement. And I cannot imagine how brilliantly this was expressed by Gandhiji as early as 1920s. Significantly, the capitalists themselves never saw the Congress as their class party. So here, whatever Sumit Sarkarji may say, the capitalists did not think that this party is under our control. They thought exactly the opposite. And look at their characterization. They say the Congress is an open-ended organization, heading a popular movement. And in the words of J.K. Mehta, who was the secretary of the Indian Merchants Chamber, which was one of the most powerful chambers before the FICCI was formed. He says, with room in it for men of all shades of political opinion and economic views. It's open-ended with room for all shades of political opinion and economic views. As I said, the Congress was a platform. So just to reiterate, they're saying that the party is open-ended, it has all classes in it, room for them to grow, and for all shades of political opinion, and therefore open to be transformed either in the left or the right direction. And they came to the conclusion that it was indeed moving in the left direction. The flurry of activity of the capitalists in the mid-30s onwards to try and influence the Congress, which misleads Professor Sarkar into thinking that they're controlling the Congress, is because the capitalist understanding is that the Congress is going out of our hands altogether. Because that is the fact of the situation. Because the communists had now entered, and the socialists and anybody with a head almost seemed to be on the left towards the 30s and 40s. So clearly they were right in their understanding, and they were in no position of trying to control the Congress. As an aside, not as historical evidence, just at this late hour to keep you, I'll take 1 minute, to keep you awake. I'll tell you the story that part of the thing we did in our interviews was not only to start from, as we did, from the Dalit woman in the village. We went up, right up to the top leadership, to ICS, to police officers, to big capitalists. So one of the interviews we did was with J.R.D. Tata, no less. So 6 of us were interviewing him. And one of the techniques we used in our interviews was not to let the interviewee know what our opinion was. So we would let them speak. I mean, this is standard method of oral history. Let them speak about their experiences, etc., from childhood onwards, etc., etc. But after the interview was over, we would say, off the record if they like, we would like to ask some historiographical questions. So in that section, which was in a sense off the record, we asked, again in a misleading kind of way, we said, Mr. Tata, how did you influence Gandhiji? We didn't say that did you or did you not. We took it for granted that you have influence kiya hi hoga. So how did you influence Gandhiji? You meaning you and the capitalists. His answer was almost the same as A.M.S. Namadvipad's, which was, he said, in Gandhiji's presence you felt so small, the question of trying to influence didn't arise. From the most revolutionary left leaders that we have interviewed to the biggest capitalists, they had the same answer about Gandhiji, that it is not somebody you bought up with money, you know. To carry just the story a little further, so we said, "Acha, Gandhiji to Mahatma the. How did you control Patel? Patel to right-winger, bourgeois. So he said, I will tell you a story. Patel, he says, was this strange fellow who would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and go for a walk at 4. And this is 1946. Independence is about to come, the constitution is being drafted, and we are scared that they will not have right to private property in the constitution. So I have been put as one of the leaders with Birla, etc. Go persuade these leaders and tell them that constitutional right to private property honi chahiye. So he goes to Patel to try and influence him. So Patel se interview manga. So Patel ji says, देखो भाई मैं 4 बजे चौपाटी में सैर करने जाता हूँ. So you come and you talk to me 4 o'clock in the morning. So this is J.R.D. Tata, you know, very westernized, सुबह से उठ के योगा नहीं करते, etc. So he says, you know, it was very difficult for me. फिर भी मैं उठे अलार्म लगा के मैं 4 बजे वहाँ पहुँचा. Patel had given 36 other people the same time. So he says, my job was to try and elbow them and get to Patel. तो कहता आप समझ जाओ कि मैंने कितना इन्फ्लुएंस कर लिया. तो हमने कहा चलो जी पटेल भी गया. तो हमने कहा व्हाट अबाउट नेहरू है भाई. नेहरू जी तो मतलब वंस ही केम टू पावर गद्दी ले ली तो फिर आप तो आपके इन्फ्लुएंस में हो गए होंगे. तो वो कहते हैं नेहरू वाज नॉट लाइक पटेल. विद अ साई ऑफ रिलीफ ही सेज यू नो वो तो मतलब इज वेरी वेस्टर्नाइज्ड. उन्होंने मुझे को 11 बजे बुलाया, फर्स्ट क्लास कॉफी और ऑफर करी, बढ़िया ऑफिस में बैठे, कहा उस सुबह 4 बजे चौपट्टी में धक्के खा रहे थे. तो पर कहते नेहरू जी के साथ बड़ा बढ़िया डिस्कशन होता रहा. फिर मैंने कहा धीरे धीरे मैं असली इशू पे आऊं. तो मैं पब्लिक सेक्टर पे आया बिकॉज द वरी वाज दैट नेहरू वाज एट दैट टाइम सेइंग दैट इन 10 years टाइम एवरीथिंग विल बी पब्लिक सेक्टर. Private business is gone. So they were very, very worried. So he says, the moment I mentioned public sector, however polite Nehru may have been, he starts looking out of the window. You know, saying, interview khatam ho jao, you know. So I think we have not used this in our historical evidencing, but certainly as a entertainment, I thought I will share this with you. Just to conclude in 1 minute. In our opinion, therefore, Gandhiji's role was to bring a long subjugated Indian people into political action against imperial domination, and also in creating the ground for the progressive forces to stand on his shoulders and fight against oppression of any kind, whether they be of caste, class, or gender. And I think in all three we make a mistake. We have now started saying that Gandhiji was anti-woman. He used to tell them to go back to the kitchen, that he is bourgeois, and of course he is anti-Dalit. And I think that is a much worse killing of Gandhi than just shooting him with one shot. I will end by saying that do not please understand my critique of this position as a critique of the left. In fact, some of the tallest of the left have led a reassessment of Gandhiji on all these matters, beginning with Professor Bipin Chandra, Professor Irfan Habib, Professor Prabhat Patnaik, are all re-evaluating this traditional, orthodox, clearly wrong understanding of Gandhiji. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aditya Mukherjee, for a brilliant presentation on Gandhi and the class analysis of national movement. I think certainly there would be some questions and comments, but it's better if we have all the three presentations together, and then later on we will have discussion for about 15 minutes. Sir, now may I request you to make your presentation? Professor Irfan Habib.
Mr. President, fellow delegates to the Indian History Congress, ladies and gentlemen, in my contribution to this discussion, I would like to repeat some of the points I have raised in a recent article to be published in the Social Scientist, for which I seek your permission. I would begin by saying that it would be a mistake, I think all would admit it to be a mistake, to look at Mahatma Gandhi as a man whose ideas remained the same. In fact, they changed over time, very considerably over time. And it's also important under what influences they changed and what they became. I would start off by starting with Hind Swaraj of 1909. As you know, Gokhale, who regarded ultimately Gandhiji as his heir and whom Gandhiji regarded as teacher, had a very poor opinion of Hind Swaraj. It was written on voyage between England and South Africa and published in South Africa in 1909, first in Gujarati and then in English translation by Gandhiji himself. Now in this Hind Swaraj, what is remarkable is that unlike all moderates and even most extremists, Gandhiji never praises the British government. He doesn't express his loyalty to the British Crown, which was almost inevitably a part of nationalist discourse at that time. But what is important in Hind Swaraj is that he looks forward to no economic advancement of any class in India, including the poor. He looks at future India proud of its poverty. There would be no mills, there would be no factories, there would be modern medicine, there would be no doctors, there would be no lawyers, and so forth, and so railways will be excluded. India would rather import cotton textiles from England than manufacture them themselves. There will be no modern education, no universities, only mullahs and pandits and dasturs, Parsi dasturs would be teaching. There would be no land reform, nothing about peasants, nothing about workers. Women must stay at home. This is the outlook of Hind Swaraj. So of course it's easy to criticize Gandhiji for all these things, and certainly Gandhi was very reactionary when compared to modern thought in Europe, even to thinkers whom he was following. He praises the caste system under the disguise of a division of labor. So even the caste system is acclaimed. Untouchability is not seen as a merit, as a demerit or an evil. Polygamy is all right, one assumes. So that's Hind Swaraj. And it's unfortunate that Gandhiji later on always called attention to Hind Swaraj with some qualifications, but it seems as if, and of course Sudhir Chandra builds much on it, that he regarded Hind Swaraj as his basic testament. My argument here is that the merit of Hind Swaraj is its rejection of British colonial power, its total absolute defiance of British power. Its demerits are many. For instance, democracy is dismissed, parliaments are an evil, even freedom of speech is not offered. But when Gandhi comes to India and Gokhale's advice, he had to follow. Gokhale said, don't speak about India before you have seen it. And it is from there, and the experience of the national movement, that one by one, the Hind Swaraj principles and vision falls. First, there is immediate conflict in Ahmedabad ashram on the issue of untouchability. An untouchable couple is not accepted by neighbors. The ashram is going to collapse. But then it is saved by a sage, probably Ambani, who gives 13,000 rupees, and Gandhiji's ashram is saved. But the point is, Gandhi refuses to succumb to caste pressure. In other words, the very caste system that he was extolling in Hind Swaraj is now faced by him as an enemy. Peasants' rights, there is nothing about them in Hind Swaraj. As if landlordism doesn't exist in India, as if zamindars were not oppressing the peasants. There is an unspoken law in Hind Swaraj that property would be protected. Leaders would not be elected but would be judged by their poverty and by their austerities. All this begins to decrumble one by one. Whatever may be said of the Champaran campaign, in effect it was an attack on property rights of indigo planters. However you whitewash it, it was an attack on property of the indigo planters. There were many rights which were established by law but were totally against ethics. And peasants would not come to you if you are defending all the time the property of the indigo planters. So that another fortress in the Hind Swaraj falls. True, one principle of Hind Swaraj was religious unity. He had denounced Hindu opposition to the proposed Minto Morley reforms. He had said that if Muslims get some more benefits than their Hindu brothers, the Hindus ought not to protest. That particular attitude continues to be Gandhi's attitudes to the very end. I think that's the only valuable insight, valuable belief in Hind Swaraj that lasts over time. My argument is that in practice, what is great in Gandhi is that he learns from practice and he revises his views one by one. It could be argued that the opposition to Rowlatt Acts was against principle of Hind Swaraj. In Hind Swaraj, he had never argued that there should be right of freedom of speech. But the whole agitation against Rowlatt Acts was on the issue of freedom of speech. The Khilafat agitation could be justified in the view of Hind Swaraj, but surely not the earlier decision of Gandhi to support the Montfort reforms, Montego-Chelmsford reforms, because in his Hind Swaraj he had denounced parliamentary units, but now in actual fact, when he's supporting cooperation on Montego-Chelmsford reforms, what is he doing except justifying a parliamentary reform? So the unrealism, the unreality of Hind Swaraj falls one by one. A Khilafat agitation might well be regarded as a part of the Hind Swaraj program, because here Muslims and Hindus were asked to combine on what looked like a religious principle. But again, it had to be supplemented by a demand for not only the righting of Punjab wrongs, but also Swaraj. And that, of course, meant Swaraj as a parliamentary republic, which, of course, was not the meaning of Hind Swaraj given in that text. In the constructive program which followed the withdrawal of the non-cooperation movement, you again have a further departure from Hind Swaraj, in that untouchability is opposed now. Women's uplift is taken up. There's anti-liquor campaign, which of course would be a part of Hind Swaraj program, but insistence on spinning. When Gandhiji was writing Hind Swaraj, he didn't know the difference between a spinning wheel and a loom. He acknowledges so much. But now it's so much emphasis on country cloth as a protection of women's livelihood, spinners and men weavers. So clearly the prohibition of women's labor that is so prominent in Hind Swaraj now falls to the ground in the constructive program, when women workers are sent to work in the countryside. The growth of the Harijan program is again a blow to Hind Swaraj, because here the entire caste system is brought into question. It's not the place to defend Pune Pact, but I must say that those who denounce Pune Pact should at least read it. And there is a doubling of Harijan representation or untouchables representation through the Pune Pact, and there is a continuation of the separate electorate for scheduled caste, because 4 candidates have to be voted first in the scheduled caste electorate, and only out of these 4 candidates the general electorate would choose the candidate. It would be quite clear from the initial election who commands the support of the scheduled caste. And clearly after Gandhiji's Harijan campaign, the name Harijan is now mindlessly denounced by everyone, and even the Congress doesn't use this word. But the Harijan campaign meant that if the separate electorate had taken place, the first candidate would always have been, among scheduled castes, the first candidate by vast majority would always have been the Congress candidate. Therefore, it was quietly removed from the reforms under the 1935 Act. This was no fault of Gandhiji. It was done with quiet acquiescence of Ambedkar and his allies. Therefore, by this time, much of what Gandhiji had propounded in Hind Swaraj was now past history. And the peasant participation in the civil liberty, in the civil disobedience movement of 1930-31, along with women's participation in it, meant, of course, that if this support had to be maintained, then much more concessions would have to be given to these classes. That explains Gandhiji's acceptance of the Karachi resolution drafted originally by Pandit Nehru and introduced by Gandhiji himself. And the fact, if I am correct, I am open to correction here because I have forgotten the reference for this, that in the draft Karachi resolution prepared by Jawaharlal Nehru for approval at the Karachi Congress in early 1931 after the suspension of the non-cooperation movement, civil disobedience movement, the item on abolition of indebtedness, peasants' indebtedness, was inserted by Gandhiji. If this is correct, then it was certainly even a greater departure from Hind Swaraj than one would have conceived. Because, as I've said, Hind Swaraj never brought into question private property or financial resources. Karachi resolution is a total disavowal of Hind Swaraj. And Tej Bahadur Sapru was right in saying that owing to the problems of disobedience movement, I mean the mass support of the peasants, someone so much looked to Tej Bahadur Sapru as a kind of problem, Gandhi had to make unforeseeable concessions to Jawaharlal. Those concessions, I would argue, were necessary from the point of view of the national movement. And it is therefore a great tribute to Gandhiji that he recognized what was necessary for the national movement, and as far as his own shibboleths and petty beliefs were concerned, he set them aside. Indeed, in his Karachi address, he argued that Karachi resolution could only be implemented by legislation, including legislation to abolish debts, indebtedness. I think this is a major document of the national movement. And I remember at school, when I hadn't a clue of what Karachi resolution meant, that we were arguing with our Muslim League class fellows and schoolboys that the Muslim League had no document like the Karachi resolution. If somebody had asked me what the Karachi resolution is, I was in class 7th and 8th, I wouldn't have known what I was talking about. But I had heard my elders, my parents, other congressmen speaking dismissively, even some communists, of the Muslim League for its lack of any social program compared to the social reform program and economic reform program compared to the Karachi resolution. It's a sad day that in India we have long forgotten the Karachi resolution, and no one now points to it, because this was actually a very important manifesto for India when it would be free. I therefore would argue that Gandhiji's greatness lies not in his original beliefs, but in his capacity to change his beliefs, not out of any personal motives, but out of his loyalty to the national movement. For that kind of loyalty, you have many proofs. It was, I think, in 1923 or 24, when he had a charge of sedition. I think our MP government should also note it, and all the BJP governments, that sedition is a charge that Gandhiji had faced, and an Indian facing sedition charge today would be facing what Gandhiji had faced. To say, in face of the sedition charge, that yes, I committed sedition, was an extreme declaration of loyalty to the national movement. No kind of excuses, open defiance. And it is this kind of loyalty that he possessed that enabled the national movement, not always according to the wishes of Gandhiji, it's to be said, but it enabled the national movement to expand its ranks and include a large number of leftist representatives. I would also like to, not only to support what Professor Aditya Mukherjee had said in the left participation, first left opposition and the left participation, but I would also remind everyone that left also contributed very greatly to the national movement. The Peshawar trials, the Kanpur trials, the Meerut conspiracy case. Not a finger was raised in the Congress ranks against the Peshawar trials, which are a travesty of justice. No one protested in Congress ranks when the Kanpur conspiracy case put communists in prison. So there was good reason for communist grievances against Congress leadership. Let us remember that when almost the majority of the Congress Working Committee, or IHC, I don't remember which body, was on the brink of passing a condolence resolution for Lenin, it was the steadfast opposition of Gandhiji that got its rejection by a small margin of votes. The opposition was on both sides. In the Kanpur conspiracy case, although the Speaker of Parliament, Sardar Patel's brother, Vittal Bhai Patel, used his veto with his vote in order to ban and in order to defeat the bill to ban the Communist Party. And Jawaharlal Nehru and Motilal Nehru were on the Meerut defense committees. But actually, Congress was not involved in the Meerut defense cases. Nevertheless, in the 1930s, the left contribution was very great. And it's a very great failure of the standard accounts of the national movement to disregard that contribution. I will only point out just one incident which personally happened to me. In the Communist Party in early 50s, Munshi Gajadhar Singh The district secretary was also, in late 1930s, the district secretary of the Aligarh Congress Committee, District Congress Committee. Harpal Singh was a member of the IHC, another communist leader. Another communist leader whom we called Swamiji, he was not a Swami at all, but I don't know why he was called Swamiji, was a member of the Congress Provincial Committee. I asked Munshi Gajadhar Singh once, asked him, why when Nehru and Patel knew that you were communists, you were openly preaching communism. He used to come to my father's house to take my father's check for the Congress on the central bank. And many of the checks are issued in favor of Gajadhar Singh. So Munshi ji thought for a while and said he had no alternative. So I said, why Gandhiji had no alternative? He said only 5 persons in this district lived in Harijan bastis and ate food supplied by Harijans. I, Malkan Singh, the Congress socialist leader, Harpal Singh, Swamiji and Murji. Nobody else. How could he appoint anyone else? We were the only eligible people. He wouldn't like to send Sri Chand Singhal, a very good congressman, a friend of my father. But like us, a middle class man who would never live, who would eat Harijan cooked food but who would never live in a Harijan basti, how he could be made member of IHC? So let us not underestimate both the strength of the Harijan movement of the Congress in 1930s. Perhaps if the Muslim mass campaign had continued, it would have resulted in a similar consequence for the Muslim support for the Congress. But unfortunately, Gandhiji bowed to the rightist pressure and called it off. Nevertheless, the massive scheduled caste vote was won for the Congress. During the war time, there was a great dispute, as we know. I would not go into it. Gandhiji preferred India's immediate national interests to international situation, and Jawaharlal Nehru is right in his discovery of India in saying that Gandhi and Patel preferred nationalism to internationalism. This was a most unfortunate decision. Unfortunate decision in many ways. It left the scheme field open totally to the Muslim League, as far as Muslims were concerned. This ought to have been taken into calculation. I don't agree that national interests here prevailed over international interests. National interests should have decreed that Congress should have remained on the field to resist, to continue its work among the Muslims. Nevertheless, that decision was taken, and even before it could be implemented, Quit India could be implemented, Congress workers were arrested. Congress leaders were arrested. India was, as Modi ji should be very happy that India was made Congress Mukt by the British government. That's the only time that it has happened, and Modi ji wants to do it again. The disturbances against the British government were not a Quit India revolution. I mean, this is such an ordinary mistake. I was a school student. I knew what was happening, why demonstrations were happening. They were protests against the arrest of Gandhiji and Congress leaders. That's quite a different thing from Quit India revolution. Nobody was saying that by these demonstrations British would quit India, nor was the demand. The demand was always release our leaders. But the very spontaneous massiveness of the demonstrations in all towns that one could read about at that time, I think proved even to the die-hard British leaders that India could not be ruled in the old way. However, the results as far as Indian political situation were unfortunate. Muslim League and separatism got consolidated. And what else to say but the fact that Hindu Mahasabha, whatever strength it got, and RSS, all that strength accumulated in these years of 40s. The communal power keg was prepared. But if Gandhiji did this, and I would still argue that Quit India decision was absolutely wrong. It was wrong in the international plane to do something which would help only Germany and Japan. It is said that Gandhiji really felt, as many had felt, and even as Stalin had felt, I would say. So in one of the letters of Stalin, it was said before the Battle of Stalingrad that Russia might be defeated. But even if this was the reading, the decision was morally wrong. And it was in practice a disaster as far as the subsequent years were concerned. Essentially, when Gandhiji himself entered Gandhijina talks, and the greatness of the man appears there, Jinnah insults him, calls Hindu Congress, not Indian National Congress, and he continues to call Jinnah Qaid-e-Azam. Every courtesy he could extend, he extended. But Jinnah wanted full power, not an autonomous Pakistan, but a totally, suppose sovereign Pakistan, but totally one in his pocket, under the name of Islam. It must be said that Muslim League was not a religious organization. It was a purely communal organization. More like the Nazi party, which was anti-Jew but never Christian. I know in my university it was proudly said by Muslim League supporters that Qaid-e-Azam never prays. And that once Nawabzada Liaqat Ali Khan asked him, for God's sake, at least learn the kalima. La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. Every Muslim is supposed to know the kalma, but he doesn't. But so they said, almost learn of it. So Jinnah was very pleased. He said that, yes, I know, Allah I know. And Muhammad is me. So I am in the kalma, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. I mean, this was a made-up joke. But who is this fellow Rasul? Where does he come in? Because Rasul, as I know as a Gujarati, half Gujarati, was a very common name among poor Muslims. Where does this Rasul fellow come in? This was proudly acclaimed by Muslim Leaguers. So I studied with Muslim Leaguers for 5 years or 6 years, so I know what they were like. They never prayed. And when the Indian History Congress was held in Aligarh in 1943, the local Muslim League University issued a diktat that guests are coming, so Pakistan Zindabad would not be raised for 5 days. So instead of Pakistan Zindabad, the Aligarh University students used to shout the slogan, Indian History Congress Zindabad. So these were days you can't imagine, those kinds of days. Abuse at one and effusion at another. Anyway, those days are past. I would say that in the last years, perhaps Gandhi was at his greatest. As far as women, I don't know. I mean, Professor Aditya Mukherjee, Professor Murugan Mukherjee are around, so I'm very nervous. But I read newspapers at that date. And a newspaper, an American or some foreign correspondent asked Gandhiji, you are speaking about women being equal to men and women can do things which men can't. can women serve in the army? So Gandhi ji said that I would prefer there was no army. I am a man of non-violence. But if there was an army, I would prefer that women should be in it. And then he thought a minute and he said, they should particularly be generals. They have mercy in that heart. They have pity in their heart. They are not totally irresponsible and arrogant as human beings. It might be a good criticism of the present army leaderships in India and the world, but Gandhiji said it. So women should be not only soldiers, but they should be the generals. They should decide matters of peace, not men. So this is a far cry from Hind Swaraj. It is therefore quite clear that there is not a single Gandhiji. There is a Gandhiji the unity in Gandhiji is given to his total commitment to Indian national movement. That is his central focus. And in order to see it flourish, in order to see it grow, he changes practically every system, every piece of his ideology enshrined in Hind Swaraj. I remember reading somewhere, again I am open to correction, that Gandhiji for obscure reasons wanted to participate in a recruitment campaign for World War I. He didn't do it in World War II, thankfully, but in World War I, he joined the recruitment camp. And so he went to the imperial conference called by the Viceroy in 1918. And he went there supporting war effort, but first he spoke in Hindustani, not English like all other loyalist Indians. And then it took the issue to demand the release of Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali, which could be the worst kind of impoliteness to undertake before His Excellency the Viceroy. But he did it. So there was throughout a self-respect in the man and courage. That, of course, was tested in 1947, which was his, I think, the finest hour. I don't know if anyone of my age is here, but I was a university student when Gandhiji was shot down by Godse. Sudhir Chand had said somewhere, which has pained me very much, that we had abandoned Gandhiji, we had killed Gandhi before Godse killed him. This is totally wrong. There can be no defense of Godse's action. The last days of Gandhi should be a lesson to us all. Today, if India violates Pakistan's airspace, we are supposed to applaud. When India refused to pay 55 crores of rupees which belonged to Pakistan, Gandhi went on fast. That is true nationalism. To tell the nation you are wrong. To oppose what you consider to be wrong, bravely and courageously. For this, Gandhi died. But I am also happy that I was alive when the next day demonstrations came out. And those who distributed sweets upon the death of Gandhi were now told what they were by large crowds, among which I am not very unhappy to say I was one. We also demanded that they should be put to gallows. So, the Indian people never killed Gandhi. Godse killed him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I have no words. The only thing is that it is one of my rarest experience of life that I heard such a presentation on Gandhi. I never heard it first. Many things which I want to underline, and that you made me emotional too. One, academically it was very strong. When you study Gandhi's ideas, not only from one book, you study Gandhi's ideas through his involvement in the national movement and how at different stages Gandhi looked on different issues which concern the Indian nation and tried to give his own point of view on those. The second thing which is very strong was your critical understanding of his relationship with the left and other parties. And then the whole thing was enriched by your personal experiences. I think that really made the whole presentation not only academically useful for all of us, but also very, very relevant in 150th year of what we started. So now I request, so our third speaker is Rakesh. So we'll have some questions later.
Friends, after these two speeches, I have not much to say, but I generally, as Professor Irfan Habib knows, I say, and quite often not the right kind of things. And I take full responsibility of what I say. I think for that they love me, I assume. What you heard, these two previous speakers, and mine is what Professor Irfan Habib was talking about his time in the university. Aditya Mukherjee was talking about his time in the university, not in the personal experience, but the debates. I have a third, in that sense, I have a third part of the Kadi, they said, series, where I have, when I went to the universities, I have the arrogant left abusing Gandhi. And now the same university is trying to look for Gandhian ways to struggle against a very extremely bad, extremely fascist regime. So in that sense, what I say is a continuation of what they were saying in a completely different trajectory. My narrative will be slightly incoherent because in the last 4 or 5 days I lost track of many things. So what I prepared, I'm trying to present in a coherent way. I was puzzled, I was hurt, I was all kind of whatever pathos you have, I had, when in Ghana students pulled down the image of Gandhi. Now, if you remember, at the same time, there were image pulling happening in Tripura, image pulling happening in many other places. And in our own university, a new image was being built. Vivekananda was built in my university. So somebody asked my comment and I said, Vivek Bihino ka Vivekanand. So that is a kind of situation in which this paper was being written. So what was happening in Ghana, the pulling down, and it was at the same time, almost like in the similar time, Professor Irfan Habib spoke at some first time when he was pained with Sudhir Chandra's argument about we killed Gandhi. and which is these two are in some ways are connected, in the sense what I would present is there are trends in contemporary historiography. I'll take historical writing rather than the movements that both of them talked so eloquently. There are trends in historiography which actually make it possible to have a Gandhi which is hollowed out, which is bereft of any connect with the movement that he led, any connect with the thoughts that he had, any connect with the kind of legacies that Professor Irfan Habib and Aditya talked about. So therefore, what is this trend? And I'll particularly focused on a kind of trend which assumes itself the mantle of liberal scholarship, which to me looks more of new liberal scholarship. But anyway, given something is authors are entitled to their own terminology, and primarily these trends is reflected in the writings of Ramchandra Guha, Nirja Gopal, Pratap Bhanu Mehta, a kind of group of people who have taken this neoliberal trends forward in a very substantive way, because there are clientele for this in the new India. Now, how do I get into this issue? Speaking before a group of journalists almost a decade back, a Colombian journalist told me that in the war-torn Colombia, in the drug war areas, there was a village when one day the army came and asked them to vacate the village. And the villagers thought something and they said, no, we will not vacate the village. Then the next day, the drug lords came and said, please vacate the army. They decided not to vacate the army. It went on for 2-3 days, and the villagers were threatened that the village would be destroyed, but the villagers did not vacate. And after some time, nothing happened. Villagers stayed. And they renamed their village, and this is surprising. The villagers renamed their village as Little India. And I asked the Colombian journalist to write this story. I hope he had written somewhere this story. But the idea that he had is that villagers have never seen India, never seen Gandhi, but they thought that they're following Gandhi. Now, that is one image that you have. In the similar way, you had Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, and they have erected Gandhi. Recently, there's a Occupy Washington, they have erected Gandhi. So in the typical dialectic fashion, there is a section which talks about Gandhi, even when they have not seen Gandhi, they have not participated with Gandhian movement, or they have not seen Gandhi, they did not have the day-to-day experience of Gandhi, but they're trying to experience Gandhi. On the other hand, we have trajectories, as I was mentioning, historiographical kind of trajectories, where Gandhi is an anathema. Now you could see from within the left, Aditya spoke about it, Professor Irfan Habib spoke about it. There are constant reevaluation, constant understanding, constant introspection about Gandhi's linkages with the left. Left talked about Gandhi being anathema to a kind of socialist society that has been discussed, reinterrogated. Gandhi has been reinterpreted in that manner so that his ideas could be taken together in the kind of our effort to a kind of progressive society. But in the recent times, if you see particularly two kinds of scholarship, two kinds of historiography, where Gandhi is an anathema, and that I think is increasingly hollowing out certain things. One is from the communal historiography that you're all familiar with, and tomorrow we'll talk about it. And one of them is where the Gandhi is reduced to just the spectacle in the sense, this spectacle, where Gandhi is just a symbol, a motif of Swachhata Abhiyan, and that there's nothing beyond Gandhi. And that has its own politics. We'll talk about it tomorrow. But the other, more pernicious, is the liberal scholarship that the new liberal practice. And the best is Ramchandra Guha's book. Ramchandra Guha is a very beautiful branding. India before Gandhi and India after Gandhi. So Gandhi becomes a brand image. Now what happens if you actually analyze the historiography of the book, it is what S. Gopal talked about Cambridge School historiography, that is a Nimierism. A lot of personal details, personal files constitute the history. There's no movement in the history of in the book, in the historiography that we are talking about. So there's no movement, there's no social agenda. Now, if you read carefully, I'll be very short. If you read carefully the India after Gandhi, you will notice two prominent items. One, that Gandhi is a figure in the post-Gandhi era, but the center stage of the entire social terrain is taken over by the forces that actually end up with the enemies of Gandhi. And that's why if you see Ramchandra Guha's a kind of rehabilitation of what was called the Congress or syndicate or organizer, this Nijlingappa and all. So they have been rehabilitated. At the same time, there's a general denunciation, general dissociation of Gandhi and Nehru. That Nehru was not Gandhi's a kind of colleague. There's not kind of legacies that Gandhi bequeathed, and Nehru was to have any of these things with his own social agenda. So these two things are going simultaneously, and by the end of 70s and 80s, the book becomes bereft of any social agenda that Indian society was talking about. And therefore, Gandhi remains India after Gandhi, where the Gandhi is just a brand image, and the internal social agenda that the book talks about is open to appropriation by any factors, and this is what I call the postmodern dilemma. Any force can appropriate that agenda, and this is being used by this is not only used, but also it kind of sanitizes history writing, and therefore you can have anybody reading this book and getting their conclusions without any social agenda to be talking about. And in this terrain comes the Ambedkar scholarship, and the best scholarship of that is Arundhati Roy, where Gandhi is a demon. India has to be constituted without Gandhi. Ambedkar is the motive, the agenda, and the social terrain. Therefore, Gandhi has to be seen as something which is opposed to Ambedkar. And this is where I think we are opening up a kind of terrain where these two trajectories that I lined up. One where Gandhi has been removed from his movement, from his colleagues, and the best is he's removed from Nehru. And the other is where Gandhi is removed from any progressive agenda. And the only progressive agenda is what Ambedkar talks about. Now these two, and unfortunately in my own university I see, and across I see, the left has, in many sense, not the left, but many shades of left, have unquestioningly adopted Ambedkar as its icon. And in that sense, there's no introspection in the left in that sense. Therefore, what is happening is that in the larger global scenario, where India in the 50s and 60s, and as Irfan so eloquently talked about, we had created a mantle for ourselves as the peace-loving, mediating, a kind of country which is a kind of moral sentinel of, and it's not an ancient practice, but my own understanding is that this idea that India is a peaceful, peace-loving country mediating in different war zones, and in fact India contributed to the civil strifes in many countries, in Laos and Vietnam, Indochina, Africa in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and for that India was not very, very much liked by the West. But even then, India had a moral standing in the world because of certain things that Nehru did, certain things that national movement did, even before Nehru or Gandhi or Patel came to the center stage. In the 1890s, 1880s onwards, Congress would always, annual session of the Congress always would pass a resolution attacking the imperial governments for forcing armies or colonial armies on different people, Afghanistan, Burma, anywhere else. This is a kind of I would say gradual evolution of an image, which also was a self-image, that we are a peace-living country, we are a peace-loving country, we'll mediate. Now that aroma that ambience that was actually articulated best by Nehru in the post-2027 anti-imperialist conference, and then when he took mantle and started his newspaper to in fact attack fascism from 36 onwards, and then when his role in UN, and then whatever you have read, Nehru's effort to bring democracy into the international world, peace in the international world, and all these are not dissociated with Gandhi. But what is happening is, by the dissociation of Gandhi and Nehru, and then India's dissociation of all these legacies, is creating another hollow where India or Gandhi, both particularly, and then Gandhi particularly, is hollowed out of all these images that we have, and therefore Gandhi becomes just a Brahmin, old, cynical, calculating politician. And if you hear a speech in our own university for the last 10 years, Gandhi is just like that, nothing more than that, except some of us are fighting against it. But Gandhi is nothing more than a Brahmin leader. He's a blockade to any progressive movement. And therefore, it is a situation where all kind of historiography is leading us to see a situation where Gandhi's image is being pulled. Now, this I wanted to connect this with the kind of image pulling, or if you want a more sophisticated word, is iconoclasm. Image pulling happened in post-Soviet Russia. In all places, Lenin's images, Stalin's images, and the best was, and the worst was, the way Saddam Hussein's image was pulled in post-Iraq war in 2002. So before the image is pulled down, there are processes of demonization happens. And in this process of demonization, I would consider Ramchandra Guha and others are providing the sanitizing, the sanitary corridor that you talked about, the sanitization of history. And that is the more pernicious element that I think about in the current historiographical terrain. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation on new liberal historiography at Gandhi. Now, I just want to say that our symposium, the symposium has to start at 6 o'clock, and that is on myth and history. So what we can do is that we can have discussion, some questions for 10 minutes or less than that. So if there is any question or comment. Yes, please. It's better also if you tell to whom you want to ask the question.
This, referring to the making of the Indian nation. Do you see India as a nation country?
Yes, Aditya, you want to comment?
Do we see India as a nation?
Yeah.
We see, as our national liberation struggle did, we see India as a nation in the making, which continues to happen. It's a process, and the reason why we should see it as a process is that if it is a process, if it is in the making, it can also be in the unmaking. So what you are witnessing today is the unmaking of the nation, and that is the danger that has to be watched.
Any other question or comment?
Just one small question of fact, if answer. Did not Gandhiji, unless I'm getting confused, did he not visit the Meerut prisoners in jail?
He did.
He did.
There were also Congress prisoners. There were Congress prisoners also.
Achha. So are you suggesting that he went to visit
Both.
Okay.
I don't know whether he was allowed to visit Meerut. He went. Because one of the Meerut prisoners in his diary has mentioned it.
That's right.
So thank you very much.
Satya has a question.
Yeah.
Please.
One very quick question actually. So, Aditya, you said
Yes, please.
that he was leading a multi-class, multi-religious, multi-ethnic, united my question is that eventually that did work out because party can happen, right? I mean, Muslims did not be a part of it.
Yeah, it is true. The fact that, you cannot describe a process only on the basis of the result. The fact that he was leading a multi-class, multi-religious, a movement of the Indian people is a fact. It is also a fact that because of multiple reasons outside Gandhiji's direct influence, part of the process failed. So the failure, while there is a failure in the partition, the success was what you did after the partition. That you did create a secular Indian state within 3 years of partition. So, it's just a way of how you look at it.
Okay then. Thank you very much. Yes, please. Please.
After the discourses, shall we say Gandhi is a Hindu Congress nationalist or Indian Congress nationalist?
What are the two alternatives?
Can we conclude that Gandhi is a Hindu Congress nationalist or Indian Congress nationalist?
Gandhi said that he is a Sanatani Hindu. What kind of Sanatani he was, everybody knows. But surely the fact that one of the Wafat Khan was a practicing Muslim 5 hours a day doesn't make him a Muslim nationalist. He was nationalist. And therefore, although one knows that Gandhi never went to a temple, he did not speak with his wife for 3 days because she visited the Great Orissa temple. All these facts are known. But if he said I am a Hindu, I would certainly continue with that decision. Khan Abdul Ghaffar said he is a Muslim. And the slogan there was Vande Mataram, Allahu Akbar. So these are unifying statements, and I would continue to believe what a man says. If he says he is a Hindu, he is certainly Hindu. But he was not a Hindu nationalist. This is a very different matter. A Hindu, whether a man is a Hindu or a Muslim, doesn't mean that he is no longer an Indian.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Only one sentence which I would say. Again, I would thank Rakesh and organizers of the Indian History Congress for having asked me to chair this session. I have no comment on all 3 presentations except one. That for me, and I think you would also share my view, that for all of us it was a learning experience. Thank you very much.